All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the panel about Asia's Web3 movements, right? Talking about the recent innovations and also the future potential of this great region. Let's kick it off with some quick intros. I'll just start. Nice to meet everyone. I am Khai, partner at LongHash Ventures, where we run a Web3 accelerator and fund, and we specialize in bootstrapping multi-chain infrastructure. And here we're joined by our esteemed panelists, of course, CJ from ZTX, Tascha from the newly rebranded Stella, previously Alpha Finance, and of course, Loy from Kyber and Kyber. Let's go around, just share what you'd like to say about, what you're working on and a little bit about where you're from in Asia. Maybe we start clockwise, so with CJ.
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Jeehyun. I go by CJ. I am the co-CEO of ZTX. So ZTX, we're a metaverse platform, and we actually have a Web2 partner, which is called Zepeto. Currently have 400 million users. We're pretty big in digital asset creation, and we're actually bringing all these creators. We would like to bring all these creators to Web3. So we're currently working on that, and ZTX is that project. Nice to meet you guys. Should I toss it to?
Yep.
I guess that's
Tascha,
me,
please.
Right? Clockwise, if my direction is right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah. Hi, my name is Tascha from Thailand. So started Alpha Finance in 2020. We recently rebranded to Stella. The main reason to rebrand is that since 2020 into 2023, we've been pioneering and doing a lot of experiments and products around leveraged DeFi. So we came up with leveraged farming. We built Alpha Homora. We did a bunch of things, came up with different concepts that would make leveraged DeFi more suitable, right? And then with so many changes that have happened in DeFi, we think that a fundamental change needs to happen for leverage DeFi as a whole, and DeFi as an industry actually needs leverage. And I can talk more, so much more about that. So Stella, is the project that rebranded from Alpha Finance to really redesign how leveraged DeFi works in such a way that incentives on all parties, be it lenders, borrowers, are so aligned that you don't actually need additional incentives from elsewhere to actually have DeFi to work. And our one-liner is that Stella is a leveraged strategies protocol that actually is 0% cost to borrow. And then when the yields actually generated from the positions, those yields actually cut and shared to the lenders instead.
Awesome. My turn then. Yeah. Hey everyone. My name is Loy. I'm a co-founder of Kyber Network. We are actually one of the, most OG decentralized chains in the space. Started back in 2017. I personally currently spend a lot more time on investing and supporting new Web3 startup. So we have Kyber Ventures, which is our venture investment arm. And recently, with a few other OG DeFi friends, also crypto friends, we started Kyber, which is basically a venture building studio. So our goal is to really, work with new founders and help them and co-build with them new interesting startup in the space. Yeah.
Awesome. So we have a good spread here today, right? I'm sure. So our panelists here, we are familiar with, of course, building projects here, getting users here, getting funding, or as well as actually investing in the region. So let's dive right into the topic of Asia. Of course, zooming out, everything looks really sexy. We have 4.7 billion people, 60% of the world population here in Asia, right? Such a powerhouse. And about 46% of that is apparently urban, so super concentrated. Everybody's really packed together and super diverse, apparently 2,300 languages. And of course, some of the largest countries, India and China. But specific to Web3, what do you think makes Asia unique, right? And how does that translate into the unique ecosystem and adoption trends or use cases in Asia? I guess anybody can kick off if anybody wants to start now, otherwise I can point to someone.
Yeah, I can start. I think for sure, all those stats are great, right? They're actually, I think one thing that we also kind of leave it out quite a lot is that with the tightening regulations of the West, be it the US or Europe, a lot of the capital is flowing to Asia. But not only just capital, but also developers, projects, moving out and living now in Thailand, Bangkok, or even Southeast Asia, right? So I think that itself is a pretty paradigm shift in which it's going to have a lot of positive spillover effect, right? I think the local community is going to get a lot of knowledge, know-how, and even understanding of what's actually driving the space, from all these people moving to Asia. So I think that's actually one big thing that is happening in Asia, in which the local talents actually get to be connected to the global network just because of the tightening regulations of the US that automatically moving a lot of things to Asia. So I think that's one huge thing that I also want to highlight.
Would you like to expand a little bit on how is that reflected in, let's say, the adoption or ecosystem? So what's actually happening on the ground as a result?
Yeah, I think the immediate things that we can see is more on the capital, right? In which all these funds, all these firms have the limited time period of how much, or when they have to deploy the capital. And I think with the US or Europe, that's a bit more uncertain on what's that going to be in the near time, right? So I think those capital will have to deploy somewhere. So I think that's going to be the most immediate change that we might see. So I think that's, in my opinion, on the capital side. On the longer term side, I think on talent, or be it the projects that's going to be building out of here, is going to get the long term benefits of the mind share of the global and the West moving to Asia, because it's going to take some time, right, for the local community to actually understand what's really driving the crypto industry, what the people in crypto actually care about. So I think that's going to take a bit of time, but at least there's actually an anchor knowledge base that people can tap into.
Last double click here. When you talk about the capital coming here as well, so do you refer to the venture funding? So basically you're seeing venture funds come here, or you're seeing that the projects in Asia are getting more funding and more attention from VCs, or perhaps you're talking about institutional capital in terms of actually having their funds be licensed here and therefore operating out of here, but then still deploying into Web3 in general. Like, what actually do you mean?
Yeah, I think if we actually kind of break it down into the money that has already been in crypto versus the new money that has not even entered crypto, right? From not the retail, right? Let's say from the funds or the corporate side. I think if you look into the money that's already in crypto, what we're seeing is that they're already raised, right? Let's say the funds that already raised their fund 2, fund 3, whatever. So those capital may be able to invest in a few US projects or European projects, but those projects are also moving to Asia. So that by default is kind of diverting the capital to Asia, right? And I think a lot of the things that's going to be driving the new capital is actually coming more from all these corporates, all these new VCs that actually missed the whole last cycle, right? And I think the whole last cycle and even bear market now, it's time for them to actually learning up and understanding, getting their risk appetite matched with the industry. And I think a lot of people kind of share the same view that this industry is not going anywhere. So it's just a matter of time that new capital is going to come in. And I think that's going to be really a big game changer, especially in Asia, where a lot of the new capital has not even entered crypto.
Well, Lloyd, you operate, of course, starting from Kyber Network now, I understand you also invest significantly, and in fact, the venture studio with Kyber. So you have experience both investing as well as potentially from the venture studio raising funds as well. So would you like to chip in here on the funding situation and maybe start to move us towards the builder's perspective from Asia?
I guess before talking about the funding part, I also want to mention about the fact that I think most of the countries in Asia actually have a really young population structure, right? Mm-hmm. So what that means is that a lot of people are young and eager to learn, eager to experiment with new things. And I think we have seen it with a few sort of previous Web3 trends, like GameFi and even DeFi, right? We see millions of people in Philippines. And like if you talk about like, crypto adoption, I think Vietnam and Philippines are actually one like among the top countries in the world in terms of like young people getting exposed to crypto and play with it, experiment with it, and try to make money from it, right? I think that's actually a really good sign that the people are actually more open to new things and to innovation like crypto and DeFi, right? Um, yeah, I think talking about the funds, I think talking about the fund side, I think in general the entire crypto space, not only like Asia, but also the West as well. I think I think everyone is looking for the new narrative, right? And also like looking for actual use cases that have the real adoption. I think that's why people have to pay a lot more attention to Asia because that's where the adoption is actually happening. Um, and we are seeing we are seeing like GameFi project like Axie Infinity with millions of users, and actually that's actually a lot more users than any other crypto use cases, right? And hopefully with like the GTX project, like what one of our panelists is working on, we could like bring a lot more users in. And I think that is actually a really good way for us to bring more users to crypto. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go a little bit more into that as well with the users. Of course, I think the Axie is the perfect example, right? Apparently, 40% of the adoption or the users from Axie actually came from Philippines, and of course, from other regions that's similar to here. But what factors do you think led to that, right? What's unique in Asia that could bring this level of adoption? And so, what does it mean for builders or projects who want to then tap into that potential for adoption?
I can start first, and others please feel free to chime in. I guess first of all, as I mentioned earlier, people just open to new things, right? Like young people, they just want to experiment and they just want to try things out. And secondly, I think the cost of acquisition for user in Asia is actually a lot cheaper compared to say users in Europe or like in the US, right? That's why with only a few dollars per day, you can get like a lot of like Filipino and Vietnamese and Southeast Asian to try out the game and to actually spend the entire day working on the game. Um, yeah, so I guess these are the couple of like good reasons. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, CJ, you mentioned 400 million users that you guys currently have. So have to point to you, how did it come about? And like, what are some insights we can gather from Asia based on those adoption trends?
The interesting thing about this 400 million users are like 60-70% of our user base are like, from teenagers to early 20s. And then the demographics, like really change, like, varies. But it's interesting to see like these young generations like adopting like this quick text like super fast. And when I see that, like, I think number one is obviously time efficiency using this like platform. And second, strong thing is the financial gains. So even like, with like us, the majority of the asset transformation, the creators are actually making their digital assets. And this is not like, we're not talking about like Web3, but like even in Web2. So they make wearable devices for their avatars. So like shoes to like their hair and like their clothings, and they actually sell to the actual users there. And what's interesting is like we have some interesting case in Zepeto. So this there is a creator called Lenji. So she wanted to become a fashion designer and she wanted to pursue her career, but she started she couldn't do that because of like personal opinions and environment and everything. But I would say that she pursued her career inside Zepeto and she started making her own brands here. And now she makes about like more than like 6-digit like good figure of like money here to buy like, and people like pay for this kind of digital assets, and like trying to spend more time like whomever is giving to this ecosystem is very interesting to see, like see current demographics of our metaverse platform. And one thing that why we're trying to like link this Web3 is obviously transfer of these assets. It make it like a lot easier, and also 100% true ownership of this like digital assets are I think the key part that we are trying to focus on.
That's super interesting, and also aligns with what Laura's been talking about, right? Like young, open-minded, willing to experiment, going digital, right? Being early adopters of all these experimental technologies and apps, like we've seen with Axie, and of course now with the metaverse as well. We also talked about a bit about the user acquisition and how that's actually cheaper. Although one other trend that we have heard is that, but perhaps the monetization from an ARPU perspective might be lower as well, even though population is larger. Do you see that with your hundreds of millions of users, CJ? Do you see a qualitative difference there, and how do you manage that?
Actually, can you repeat the last question again? Like,
so in terms of the ARPU, so the revenue per user, is there a difference? So in terms of number of users, we're great, and it's also much easier or cheaper or faster to actually acquire these users. But once we get them, are these users different in terms of like other behaviors such as monetization or stickiness and so on?
Sure. So I think like whomever owns a lot of assets, like inside our like Zepeto as well, their time spending actually inside here is a little bit lower, but whom is actually creating and using, like their time consumption inside our is like a lot higher. I think that really makes sense in this world as well. So there are kind of like investors and also like users trying to do that, and I see that as like a fair point. There are like people giving like lands plus like the investors plus like people spending time, and we give like rewards and benefits for that, and then creating. So it's kind of like similar to our actual economy here, and people using the digital world, they are not aware of that, but it is similar to like the actual economy, like, and it's becoming like that.
Sorry, the question when you say actual economy becoming like what?
Actually, like actual economy is also being like being inside the metaverse world and digital world as well.
Right.
So
got it.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, we've touched on quite a few angles of like how Asia is special, and therefore how you should think about it from funding, builder, and user perspective. Now, I want to explore how that might change as well. So we're talking about now the future potential and future innovation, right? Because not everything stays the same. Of course, we've seen like one major example here in the past, let's say 5 to 10 years, Bitcoin mining in China, right? It accounted for something like 75% of all the mining power. And today, there's something like 20%. And of course, that's because of regulatory crackdown. And yet, we see something like in Hong Kong now, retail trading opening up on 1st June. So things can change quite quickly. We might see some trends strengthen or some trends even reverse. So let's talk about like what might change, or what changes today do you see that will have longer term implications as we go in Asia? Whoever likes to kick it off.
Yeah, I guess I can kick it off. So I think apart from positive externalities of different projects or developers moving to Southeast Asia, I think another thing that's happening too is that and I think this kind of goes along with Lois and CJ's point, which is like in order to acquire any kind of people in Southeast Asia, I think they're like double-edged swords, right? I think the positive thing is that it's very low barrier, and I think the low barrier actually comes from the fact that there's nothing to lose, to be honest. In Web2 world, there are not that many opportunities, I would say, in Southeast Asia. For example, if you look at job opportunities, I think in the US, in Europe, I think there are a lot of opportunities in Web2. So I think when you compare that to Southeast Asia, and when those opportunities are quite limited, I think it actually makes it so much more interesting and more attractive to actually consider everything more of like Web3 first, be it your job, be it your investment, be it your products that you use, because opportunities in Web2 are not that promising in Southeast Asia to begin with. So I think that's the positive thing, right? The negative thing though is that across Southeast Asia, or in Asia in general, even though in total there are so many millions of people, but each country has its own social context. Each country has its own language, and then in order for you to kind of expand from one to the other, it actually takes quite some time to understand the nuances of each country, and really in order for you to like tap into that country, you really need to get it right. So I think it's the downside of this region as well, because the social context matters so much more than the West. So I think that's one of the things that I think will also have a lot of impact on projects looking to expand to Asia. I think a lot of the projects that we see now, be it infra or be it metaverse, looking to expand to Asia, I think it's definitely a good initiative. But I think the tricky part and the bottleneck is going to be like, how are these projects or these companies are going to really understand each local country in such a short time, right? And like in such a way that is cost efficient too, because you also don't want to have the whole team in each country, right? So I think that's the things that we're going to see more in the recent changes.
Got it. So you predict that actually more companies will need to know, or more projects need to know how to adapt to Asia, because if we're looking to Asia as the place for adoption, then everybody's going to need to know how to adapt to the population, to the culture, to the languages, and the nuances of the people here. And Loy wanted to respond.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I just want to add, another point about, I think one of the very obvious and strong movement that I think is happening at the moment is because due to the regulatory crackdown, or not really crackdown, but uncertainty in the US, that SEC and a few other government bodies are doing there. I think more and more, even like US and Western platforms are actually deciding to roll out the platform in the Asia first, right? Instead of roll it out in the US, they decided they will go to Asia. And I think we're also seeing a lot more activities are happening in countries like Hong Kong and Thailand and even Japan, where there's actually a clear regulation about crypto activities, right? Crypto related activities. So I think that is actually very obvious then, and I've seen several projects doing that already. Yeah.
I see. Are there particular examples you like to highlight, or is this still confidential?
I don't think I need to name names, but I think a lot of them, during the call they mentioned about the reason and why they prefer to do this, to do Asia first, and especially protocols like derivative tradings, or anything related to lending or involved to token airdrop and things like that. A lot of them wanted to avoid the US market at the moment.
Right. Yeah, especially when it's touches like the financial regulation, it's just so strict right now in other jurisdictions. CJ, do you see the same for gaming metaverse related projects?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like regulatory issues, obviously that it's big, and we will definitely sometimes block some kind of users, and they obviously come through VPN, but yeah, there are a lot of that coming in, and we can see through our data very clearly.
Right. So what do you actually see in the data?
I mean, obviously, Chinese people who's coming to would try to come in, they all use VPN, and that's just by when the government sentences anything regulatory thing that's getting blocked. So that I think is just very heavily dependent on this one regulatory, and US SEC them as well.
I see. Well, yeah, I'm surprised you can actually see people coming through VPN. That means you're able to track them.
Yeah, I mean, not through the VPN, but you can see the demographic going down from certain regions and coming up from. Then we can kind of assume that is happening.
I see. So even though there might be let's say even crackdown in China, the users are still there, but just coming through other pathways.
Right.
Awesome. I'd like to move to a third segment here. to also then share more practical tips and steps for various parties who like to tap into the potential for Asia. I think Tascha already started talking a little bit about it, right? In terms of then like how do you then tailor your approach in terms of getting to these regions. Perhaps you'd like to kick off again. I think you kind of touched on basically kind of like the maybe community building aspect of like the language and culture. Right? Do you have any practical tips or resources that you'd like to point to for, let's say, builders, and we can also share other perspectives as well?
Yeah, I think in general, I think in terms of building now, it's really important to, coming up with a view of where the industry is going, because I think it's pretty easy to kind of stick to the past or, stick to see, what has worked in the past. And I think that's also the tendency of, the mindset of people especially in Asia too, right? So seeing what works in the past and trying to apply that to the recent or the future. And I think it actually does not apply too much in crypto because things change and change forever because it moves really fast, right? So I think it's really key to, for developers or any projects to really zoom out and see, hey, what's actually happening in DeFi, in NFT, Metaverse, and coming up with your own view of how that's going to be, and really ask yourself like how your product or how your project is going to answer what problem. Is that problem is actually going to be a big problem down the line? And I think the fact that a lot of the people or capital moving to Asia helps a bit, because you can actually talk to those people, bounce with investors, and actually see how those ideas resonate. Because it's pretty easy to kind of live in your bubble if you think among your team yourself. So I think that is, I think, the most important. You can read a lot of materials for sure, but also bear in mind those, the materials of the past, right? I think what's really important is really understand and develop your own view.
So who do you recommend talking to develop that view?
I think talking to a lot of project founders help globally, right? So don't try to limit yourself to local projects. Only you can even reach out to projects that you may already use their products on Twitter, on their community. Some of them you might be surprised that they're actually in town. They just did not, advertise it there, in Thailand or Vietnam, right? And I think that can, be a good start. And then once you actually talk to a few, then you actually hear how they're seeing it and what they're actually seeing from them operating in the ground.
Are there specific examples you like to highlight? Some friends you'd like to shout out?
Well, those are anonymous people who I know are like in Bangkok, but surprisingly, a lot more people, be it running anon projects or be it just KOLs on Twitter, they're actually, hiding in Phuket or, in Pattaya or Bangkok. But yeah, I think a lot of, and those people are not Asian, like those are Westerners. So I think that also says a lot to that reach to knowledge base that's actually a lot closer than you think.
I see. So Anons on Twitter, turns out they live in Asia.
Yep.
All right. Either CJ or Lloyd?
I actually also saw quite a bit of like, unknown people living in Vietnam and also like Singapore as well. Like actually, like I actually got surprised like when I actually like know that, a couple of guys are actually staying in Hanoi and no one knows about them, right? So I happened to jump into like crypto conferences in Tokyo, for example, and they said, hey, I actually stay in Vietnam. I was like, wow. But actually a lot more people like that, right? So they just like travel the world, stay in Asia and, do their Twitter thing, and be part of the global, like, crypto movement, right? But, I think in terms of like getting into the Asian market, I guess localization is the must, right? Because like, I think you mentioned earlier because of languages, because of like culture and stuff, right? So, most people cannot speak like English in many countries. So you probably have to localize whatever of your product, of your platform, and get some local guys, like some local country manager to help you to navigate the space. And I think one thing that I actually see that is actually quite common in Asia, that the local people, the local users, they would love to see the founders on the ground, right? Although like in crypto, it might not be a good practice, but I think in Asia, people just appreciate you a lot more if you are the project founder and you actually like spend time and be present at some of the local community events. Yeah, so I think that build the trust a long way. Although crypto is so about trustless, but when it comes to like people relationship, right, I think people still value that sort of trust.
Right. Still comes to people. So just coming down in person, spending time, there's no replacement for that. When you talk about localization and finding country managers and the languages, how exactly do recommend the projects go about that? Are there particular resources, platforms, people that you recommend, you like to shout out here?
Well, I mean, like I think every countries will have like different kind of community leaders, right? And I think they probably are the good start for you to reach out to. I guess in Singapore there are not too many people. LongHash, you guys are doing a great job there. I think in Vietnam there are a few other community sort of like groups as well that probably everyone knows. Like all the Kairos and Coordinated and Kyber, we have a big team here as well. Yeah, I think like just reach out to all these community leaders or project founders in the respective countries, and I think they're a good start, right? They can help you like introduce to other people there.
Got it. Thanks, Loy. CJ, practical advice.
I mean, sure, like, culture, like, that's super important, like localization and I mean, practical advice, I'd say, like, I mean, this is indeed location arbitrage as well. Like, as Tascha said, it's a lot cheaper to onboard, like, people too, like more effective in that sense too, but great talents here, I think that, and I mean, if you think about it, the living of a cost, like, can be very different, and the talents like here, like pools are very, they're great people like Southeast Asia, Thailand, like Korea, Japan, like Singapore, and like this is a global platform that we're all building. So I think that can be very like cost effective in like very variety of ways, and you can find very a lot of gems here, not just the user but developers, builders, and communities, and everything.
So for a project or builder looking for those users or talent, right? Like, how do they do it actually? Like, so where did they go? Who do they talk to?
I mean, we use everything pretty much, but obviously like suggestions and the community itself, like, and headhunters too. But there's no specific way of like finding those gems, I guess.
Okay, find your way.
Yeah.
Or are there particular ones in Korea you like to recommend?
You mean like to find like talents?
Well, from all perspectives, right? I guess like community or talent or users.
Like Korea right now, like all those like big ones are filled out, so it's more like I guess like I can't really like pick one in general, I guess, like, but right now it's too many things happening, but also like Web2 enterprises have all jumped in to here, especially like gaming parts, and they have their own entities like getting, and that user base plus like that user community is all jumping in here, including like developers. So I think that can be a pretty good interesting tool to like start tapping to.
Are there particular enterprises you like to highlight in Korea who you think might be great partners or people to talk to?
I mean, like big, for game companies, Netmarble jumped in, Come to Us jumped in. I don't know if you guys Come to Us. I heard they're making their own chain called Xplot too, and it's like very, they're open to everyone pretty much. So like those communities are very open to like everyone, and they don't really mind, and they're like not really closed-minded about like their own things. So I think it's interesting to see those people, and yeah, actually Nexon too. Like Nexon is lining up with the corporate, like they're coming to this industry as well. So it's a pretty interesting scene here that everyone's jumping into this industry. Yeah, I cannot like not think of anyone who's not jumping into this industry. So
Wow. Awesome. Yeah, all these Web2 giants in gaming and entertainment really all coming in. And it's very encouraging to hear. Yeah. Tascha, anything you want to add now again? Or we can move to a different perspective?
Yeah, I think different perspective.
Yeah,
would be
for sure.
good.
So yeah, now we talked about like builders and how you can come and get adoption and so on. Now, switching perspective, new users. All right, so we might come in and say, oh, okay, I've heard a lot about crypto. I heard there's all these new stuff coming up. Let's say it's gaming. Let's say it's new DeFi projects. They want to try some products. They want to learn about crypto, learn about Web3. Where would we recommend that these new users go to? I know we have 5 minutes left, so we would try to do like, let's say 1 minute each.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make it super concise. First is read up about Bitcoin, Ethereum. I think you cannot use DeFi or be in this space without knowing about that history. And by that alone, you would understand a lot of what's the driven ethos behind a lot of things that are happening. Second is make sure you don't get scammed. Luckily, we're in the bear market, so it's not as much as in the bull. But be sure to understand wallet security, understand how to do test transfers and all that. And then for sure, finally is use I think the main protocols on Ethereum. I think Ethereum has been proven for sure that security works. A lot of the things work on Ethereum. So better to start there. And then now that it's also low gas fee environment, it's more beneficial to kind of try different things out. So lend some assets, do some trades, all on chain, right? So not on the centralized exchanges or platforms.
All right. Let's go around. And if there are particular wallets, protocols, projects you recommend trying out for a new user that's really intuitive or educational, please shout those out as well. Maybe Lloyd?
Sure. I think I actually think like Twitter is a great place to for people to learn new stuff about crypto, and I think most of us like use Twitter quite a lot to get updated to what is happening in the space. But for the new users, apart from what Tascha said about learning about Bitcoin and Ethereum and try out different protocols, I think install MetaMask, get yourself a ledger or a treasure. Try out Uniswap, Kyber swap, Aave, try out, whatever, like basically you can just go to like, DeFi Llama and sort out all the protocol by TVL and you can just try, most of them, right? As much as possible. I think that's a good start. Yeah.
Awesome. CJ, let's hear some different ones. What games should we try, or like what new tools that are more gaming focused or metaverse focused can we try?
I think us actually we're having our first Genesis Mint like in a month, and if you guys like go watch it out, I think it'll be pretty interesting. We're having our home sale, and as I think a lot of a younger generation probably like would think the same, like this expression of like themselves inside this digital world became like very, very important, not just like in the real life. Their screen time right now already exceeded like average 8 hours, and like how they express themselves and having to claim that this is like theirs. I think it would be very important to learn, and it'd be very interesting to like spend time like in this crypto like metaverse platforms.
Awesome. And where should they go to do that?
ZTX.io. We have Avatar Builder too. You guys can try out, like link to our wallet, and you guys can build your avatars, play around with it. It's very detailed, so you guys can try that out. And yeah, or beta launching on this third quarter. So yeah, like
awesome. All right, I think we have maybe just 1 or 2 minutes left. So let's finish off with any last thoughts, concluding thoughts you want to share about Asia, or hopefully something that's surprising or controversial, maybe like 1 or 2, like even words.
Yes, my biggest hope and my biggest fear actually lies in China.
we are actually looking at India as well, because I think that's an untapped market, and now they are like, the most populated country in the world.
TJ, wrap us up.
I mean, we're actually partnering a lot with the Japanese companies with a strong IP holders in Japan, but that I definitely think would attract a lot of user base, and it can be a very strong asset to bring in, and yeah. And
Awesome. Well, with that, let's wrap up our panel. Thank you very much again for your time, and I hope for everyone tuning in, you've learned lots and expanded your perspective on Asia.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.